Chapter 16. Hammerfall Time. Day 20 post-lock location. Calgary International Airport invasion. Clock. T plus 14.5 hours. The airdrie perimeter didn't break. It evaporated. From his RV at Cross Iron Mills, Major Boone Hennessy watched the northern horizon ignite. The first wave of Bruin's Urzine troops hit the line at a dead run, and the Alberta Guards' gunfire, though frantic, was like throwing gravel at a freight train. Then, Boone's trap sprung. Tinjaskarat's mines, planted on the main highway, detonated in a synchronized chain, ripping the vanguard of the Ursine charge into a cloud of shrapnel and fire. A heartbeat later, the remote detonated fuel tankers on the Stony Trail overpass exploded, creating a colossal rolling firewall that instantly engulfed the next 3 waves of lupine infantry. The concussive whoomp rattled Hennessy's teeth even 5 kilometers away. The Shadow Grasp's ground advance slammed to a halt against a 300-meter wall of roaring petroleum fire. It worked, Boone breathed, a grim smile touching his lips. It actually, sir, air contacts, his comms tech yelled. Fast movers, inbound from the southeast. Multiple signatures. It's hammer and anvil flights. As if summoned by the fire, 8 C-18s tore across the sky, their engines a deafening shriek. Hammer 1 to accord command, the lead pilot's voice crackled, sharp and clear. We have 8 birds in the air. We see the firewall. Amberflight is engaging ground targets, those weird cannons. Anvilflight, you are on high cover. Target those galleons. Fox 3. The first 4 jets Hammerflight screamed over the eastern ridge, unleashing their missiles. The word cannons Bruin had so carefully placed erupted in a secondary explosion of green energy and twisted metal. The first pass was a perfect, clean kill, but the sky was now full of targets. The steam galleons, having cleared the smoke from the firewall, were advancing. They were terrifyingly close, their hells blotting out the stars. Anvil flight, engaging hostiles, missiles away. On his command ship, Mortis Rex watched the jets approach. Formidable, but predictable. He gave a single, silent command. The Shadow Grasp fleet stopped its advance and turned, forming a dense, staggered wall of broadsides. Anvil Flight's missiles slammed into the unshielded hulls of the smaller troop carriers. Several of the steam galleons, hit in their boiler rooms, exploded in a massive shower of shrapnel and steam. A small cheer erupted from Boone's RV. The galleons answered. They unleashed a storm of magical flak, superheated rock slugs, and crackling web-like nets of energy. Anvil 3 is caught! The net's got him, a pilot shrieked. A jet, entangled in a glowing word net, spiraled wildly before a rock slug shattered its cockpit. Hammer 2! Break right! Break right! Flak! Another jet, turning to support, was vaporized by a concentrated volley. The command ship Necropolis was untouched, its shroud of unbeing absorbing the few missiles that got through. The pilots were good, but they were fighting a 3D battleship formation in a knife fight. This is Anvil 1, we are Winchester. All missiles expended. We've knocked out a dozen of the bastards, but they're too many. Hammerflight, cover our retreat. RTB, RTB. As the remaining jets turned to flee, Mortis's flagship had its revenge. A green lance of energy stabbed from the Necropolis, vaporizing one of the retreating F-18s. The air battle, lasting 3 brutal minutes, was over. The Alberta Guard had lost 4 jets, but had taken a real toll on the enemy fleet. The steam galleons, smoking and damaged but still legion, resumed their inexorable advance toward the airport. At the WYC perimeter, Boone watched the last friendly IFF signature blink out. Damn it. The firewall was holding, but the airships were now overhead, beginning to rain fire on his position. He had maybe 20 minutes. Then, the true horror began. Major, a trembling voice came over the radio from a forward observer. The men. The Airdrie survivors. They're... Oh God! They're getting up! Boone lifted his binoculars. Through the smoke, he saw them. The Albertan soldiers killed in the first rush. The Lupine and Ursine infantry, shredded by the mines. All of them, their forms flickering with the same sick green energy as the word cannons, were climbing to their feet. They ignored the firewall, their dead eyes fixed on one target, the airport. Necromancy. Boone whispered, the word tasting like ash. That green energy, they're raising their dead. Run! A scream tore through the radio. A dozen defenders on the perimeter dropped their rifles and fled, only to be cut down by a volley from the airships. The men who fell immediately began to twitch and rise again. Hold the line! Boone roared into the mic, his voice cracking. They're slow! Aim for the head! It's the only way! Hold it until hell freezes, then hold it on the ice! Major, his tech shrieked, pointing west. The transports! They're on final! Through the chaos, the three massive planes, Globemaster and Lawkeepers 1 and 2, were descending, their landing lights cutting through the smoke. Lawkeeper 1, you are not clear. The runway is hot, Boone yelled. We see a Major! Oh, Joyce! The pilot's voice shot back. The C-17 slammed onto the runway, its reverse thrusters screaming as it taxied, not toward the terminal, but toward Boone's RV. The two A350s landed right behind it, their ramps already lowering as they rolled. The C-17's ramp dropped, but instead of a confident formation of reinforcements, it looked like a scene from a malfunctioning factory. Out stepped a Vulpine Magister, Line, her fur bristling with static. Behind her spilled a dozen Alpha Brain figures in mismatched armor, clutching rifles that looked like they had been salvaged from a madman's workshop. Go! Go! Clear the ramp! Woman in grease-stained fatigue shouted, shoving a younger engineer forward. She wasn't holding her rifle like a weapon, but like a live viper. Chief Engineer Lasky says 3-round bursts only. Do not hold the trigger. Boone watched, stunned, as the Geek Squad fanned out. Their M4 carbines were unrecognizable. The barrels were wrapped in thick, copper heatsink coils that were already glowing a faint, angry orange. Silver paint, smelling sharply of ozone even over the battlefield smoke, was smeared over the receivers in jagged, hand-etched patterns. Contact front! Lasky screamed! Engage! One of the engineers raised his rifle at a charging Ursine zombie. He fired a short burst. There was no gunshot crack. Instead, a sound like tearing canvas echoed across the tarmac. The bullets, sheathed in a visible shimmering distortion field, didn't just hit the zombie. They punched through its necrotic aura with a flash of blue light, tearing the creature apart. It works! The engineer yelled, grinning, until his rifle vented a jet of superheated steam directly into his face mask. He dropped the weapon, screaming as the barrel turned white-hot in the snow. I said short bursts! Lasky roared, firing her own weapon before jamming the smoking barrel into a snowbank to cool it. Watch your heat sinks! If the paint turns black, drop it or lose your hands! Boone stared. These weren't soldiers. They were bomb disposal techs carrying the bombs. Line, I presume? Boone yelled, running up to the Vulpine as another engineer frantically slapped a fresh heatsink onto his rifle. Line didn't look at him. She was watching the unstoppable, rising tide of Mortis's army. Major Hennessy. This position is indefensible. Every soldier you lose becomes his. Boone stared at the terminal, then at the shambling horde. Well, shit. He keyed his command mic, his voice flat and dead. All Accord elements, Hennessy here. The Alamo is lost. Fall back to the city center. I repeat, all units, fall back into Calgary. We'll make our stand at the river. Chapter 17. The Cold Calculation Time. Day 20 post-lock location. The Necropolis Bridge Invasion Clock. T+15 hours. The bridge of the Necropolis was a tomb of silent, blue-glowing instruments. Mortis Rex stood unmoving, his skeleton Lecker-like form silhouetted against the viewpoint. His focus was on the tactical feed, watching the last of the Accord transports, a mere speck, vanish into the western sky. He had seen the Volpari Magister line disembark. Volpari, he hissed, the sound a dry rattle in the tomb quiet of the bridge. The 11 nations dare to interfere directly. His cold fury, usually a tightly controlled singularity, began to leak. He watched the tactical display update with his losses. 12 galleons. 12 of his ships, his resources, his time, traded for a patch of burning tarmac. They collude with the Accord. The navigation instruments shattered, their internal green light dying with a spectral sigh. They believe their toys of metal and fire can challenge me, Mortis roared. The undead crew flinched, their bodies rigid with magically enforced terror. They throw away their lives for nothing. Vane promised me an undefended, fractured continent. Seized the heavy iron and bone command throne, a piece of furniture weighing half a ton, and hurled it across the bridge, where it smashed into the main bulkhead with a sound like a breaking church bell. They will all be recycled. Every one of them! Architect. An Isengrim adjutant, his fur singed and his armor dented, stumbled onto the bridge. He was visibly trembling. Mortis spun, the blue light in his sockets flaring. What? It is General Bruin. Architect. She led the charge against the firewall. She was caught in the fuel detonation. The Lich's tantrum vanished instantly, replaced by an absolute, chilling stillness. Bring her to me. 2 massive Behogard, themselves wounded, carried their general's broken form onto the bridge and weighed her on the deck. She was a ruin. The unstoppable bear woman, Bruin the Mountain, was missing her left arm entirely, the shoulder a ragged, cauterized stump. Her right leg was gone at the hip. Her thick black fur was matted with blood and chemical residue. Her polished Catin armor blasted into 1,000 fragments. Her breathing was a shallow, wet rattle. Mortis Rex stared down at his dying general with no emotion. No urgency. He observed her with the detached curiosity of an engineer looking at a broken cog. Crude, he mused, but effective. A kinetic petroleum detonation. Their reliance on chemical energy is predictable. He knelt, not in sympathy, but for a better angle. He raised one skeletal hand over her torso. A web of frigid, green-black energy descended, enveloping her wounds. It was not a healing spell. It was a stasis charm. The bleeding stopped. The ragged flesh turned a pale, waxy grey. Her breathing stabilized into the barest perceptible rhythm, but she did not wake. She will serve, Mortis stated flatly. He stood and turned to the adjutant. The Accord has shown its hand. They've landed their specialists. They believe they can hold this city. A dry, rasping laugh echoed in the chamber. They have merely gathered the harvest in one place. He pointed a long, bony finger south, toward the distant, defiant cluster of lights that was the city's core. The airport is a compromised asset. Our true objective is that glass and steel needle they call a tower, is the highest point, the seat of their hubris. Once I am there, I will plant the grand anchor. The entire city will be converted before sunrise. He turned back to the adjutant, his voice dropping to a low, lethal command. Recall the fleet. Form a high-cover perimeter. The Soul Cage emitter has given us a new legion from their perimeter dead. The ground forces, all of them, will advance on the city now. We will fight them, street by street. The adjutant scrambled to relay the orders. The necropolis shuddered, its great steam paddles churning the air as it began its slow, menacing advance toward downtown Calgary. Mortis Rex was left alone with the inert form of Bruin. He stared down at her ruined body, a flicker of what might have been academic appreciation in his glowing eyes. Such fragility, he whispered, hovering his hand over her severed shoulder. Such wasted potential. Lord Vane wanted a general, but I shall build him a god. He was already plotting the monstrous upraids. The biological had failed. The arcane mechanical would not. Chapter 18. The Blue Line Gauntlet Time. Day 20 post-lock location. Calgary Airport Terminal invasion. Clock, T plus 15.5 hours. The airport tarmac was a kill box. Nautis's airships, led by the Micropolis, had formed a high, menacing perimeter, raining down word lances that turned Alpha Brain's APCs into molten slag. The reanimated dead, a shuffling mix of Alberta Guard and Shadowgrass Balagard, were already shambling through the burning terminal. This is not a retreat, it's a rout! Major Boone Hennessy roared, emptying his rifle's magazine into an Isengrim warrior before slamming a fresh one home. We've got what can you do? My RV is a damn torch. Vehicles are a liability, Major. Line, the Volpari Magister, shouted over the din. Her fur was matted with soot, but her yellow eyes were sharp and analytic. They are large, slow, and your fuel burns. We move as the wind brings hard from the movement. The root is power. What do you think, Magister? Asked. She pointed not south, but east, toward the elevated concrete tracks of the sea train's blue line that serviced the airport. The train's dead, Line. The whole grid is down. The grid is, Major. The motors are not, she countered. My scouts are already in place. Now, move! The 40-odd survivors, a hybrid mix of Hennessy's remaining guard, Gamma Brain specialists, and the Accord's own geek squad from the FOB, broke from the relative cover of the baggage claim. The 300-meter sprint to the sea train station was a gauntlet. A reanimated Isengrim, its movements jerky but strong, raised its rifle. Sparks! Une yelled, and one of the Accord engineers, a young man who had been calibrating sensors at the FOB 24 hours ago, swung his rune-etched M4 up. He didn't just shoot. He pulsed a small, focused kinetic shove of weird energy, learned from the Isengrim Cavaliers. The blast didn't kill the undead soldier, but it knocked it off its feet, buying them a precious second. They slammed through the glass doors of the airport's sea train station and bounded up the escalators to the platform. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and the green-black energy of the Soulcate emitter. They're pacing us. Boone yelled, looking up. Through the station's glass ceiling, he could see the necropolis and its escorts, matching their pace as they ran south along the tracks, herding them. They think we are predictable, in hissed, her eyes scanning the tracks ahead. They are correct, but they have not accounted for our ingenuity. They ran for 2 kilometers down the exposed, elenated track, the concrete vibrating as word lances struck nearby. The airships were deliberately missing, forcing them deeper into the city. Just as Boone was about to order his men to disperse into the residential neighborhood below, Line held up a hand. Here! Ahead, sitting dark and silent in the Martindale station, was a 3-car sea train. They piled into the station, the airships momentarily losing their firing angle. It's dead, Line. No power to the overhead lines. Sparks, the engineer, panted, his hands on his knees. We are not using the lines, Line said calmly. 2 Volpari Magisters emerged from a driver's cab. It is ready, Magister Line, one said, his voice a dry rasp. Cab's control panel was ripped open. The complex Alpha Brain circuitry was now fused with something impossible. A massive, glowing blue-white crystal, the size of a car battery, humming with a power that made Boone's teeth ache. Wires, guided by sparks, were crudely soldered from the crystal to the train's main electrical bus. A weird capacitor, Line explained. My scouts have been pouring ambient energy into it for an hour. Sparks identified the correct linkage. It will burn out the motors. But it will be fast. How fast? Boone asked, grabbing the driver's controls. Faster than steam, Major, Line said with a grim, fox-like smile. Go. Boone slammed the throttle forward. The train did not accelerate. It launched. The electric motors, never designed to handle raw, unrefined magical energy, let out a piercing, multi-tonal shriek that shattered every window in the station. The train rocketed from 0 to 150 kilometers an hour in seconds, pinning the soldiers to their seats. Instead, our lives followed on two-manner canvas. On the necropolis, Mortis Rex watched the sea train shoot out from under his fleet like a missile. Shoot! Destroy it! The steam galleons turned, their paddles churning the air, but they were built for lift and stability, not acceleration. The sea train, screaming like a banshee, was already a kilometer ahead, careening down the central 36th Street track, blowing through empty stations without slowing. A word lance from a flanking galleon managed to strike the rear car, shearing the metal and causing a violent lurch, but the train held the track. It was a blue-white comet streaking through the dark, abandoned city. 10 minutes later, as they crossed the Bow River into downtown, the crystal in the cab cracked, the screaming whine of the motors died, and the lights went out. The train coasted on pure momentum, screeching sparks as Boone slammed the emergency brakes. It slid to a halt in the 7th Avenue Transit Corridor, right in front of City Hall. The team, bruised and deafened, piled out onto the empty street. The air was cold, smelling of the river. Across the street, they saw the new defensive line. General Rhodes, his face a mask of grime, stood beside an M1 Abrams tank parked on the Center Street Bridge. Accord soldiers were dug in along the riverbank, their rifles pointed north. Boone Hennessy jogged up to him, his rifle held low. The Alamo is lost, General. But the cavalry's here. Rhodes didn't smile. He just handed Boone a set of binoculars and pointed north, across the river. The vanguard of Mortis's army, a shambling, endless tide of the airport's dead, was already visible, marching relentlessly down Center Street. The airships, furious and no longer holding back, were right behind them. Chapter 19. The River Line Time. Day 20 post-lock location. Center Street Bridge invasion clock. T+16 hours. The battle for Calgary began not with a charge, but with a relentless crushing weight. From the north, Mortis's Legion of the Reanimated Dead, a grotesque mix of Alberta Guard, Isengrim, and Baloo Guard, marched without sound, their only goal to cross the Bow River. From the sky, the steam galleon fleet, led by the Necropolis, began a systematic orbital bombardment of the downtown core. "Magisters, now," Line commanded, her voice cutting through the first terrified screams of Accord soldiers. She and her Volpari team were not on the riverbank. They were positioned 2 blocks south, in an intersection surrounded by skyscrapers. They raised their hands in unison, drawing on the ambient word. They used the massive glass and steel towers, the Bow, Suncor, City Hall, as colossal grounding rods, weaving a shimmering violet canopy of word energy over the streets, spanning from building to building. The first volley of green word lances from the airships struck the magical shield. The energy sizzled and dissipated, sparing the soldiers below. But the impacts were violent, causing the shield to flicker and raining down a harmless static charged snow that smelled of ozone. "It's a shield, not a wall," Line's voice crackled over Boone's radio. "It will stop the energy, but not the ships. Major, the ground is yours." On the Center Street Bridge, Major Boone Hennessy, General Rhodes, and the combined Alpha-Gamma ground force met the first wave. It was a brutal, close-quarters brawl, fought with rifles, magic, and desperation. The undead, driven by the Soul Kate emitter, were slow but unstoppable. They shambled out of the river, covered in silt and ice, and met a wall of muzzle flashes. "Aim for the head, then the legs," Boone roared, firing his shotgun into the mass. "We don't need to kill him, we just need to make him stop." The true horror of Mortis's tactic became clear within the first 10 minutes. An Accord soldier, struck by a stray Isengrim arrow, fell from the bridge. Most immediately, his body began to twitch, his movements enslaved by the green necrotic energy. "River!" yelled a gamma-brain Beluga mercenary. "Get him in the river!" Before the soldier could rise, two of his squad mates grabbed his body and, with a grim heave, tossed him over the railing into the fast-moving current of the bow. The tactic was brutal but effective. The necrotic energy still reanimated the corpse, but the freezing, powerful current was too much for the simple, undirected motor functions. The risen soldier was swept downstream, tumbling uselessly in the rapids. A grim new protocol was born on the spot. "No dead on the shore," Rhodes bellowed. "Friend or foe, if they fall, they go in the water. Keep the battlefield clean." For an hour, they held. It was a perfect, terrible stalemate. The airships couldn't breach Line's word shield. The ground army couldn't overwhelm the Accord's choke point at the river, especially with their fallen being recycled by the current instead of mortis. But it was a battle of slow, agonizing attrition. Line's magisters was sweating, their energy draining as they continuously poured weird into the shield. Boone's soldiers were running low on ammunition. "This isn't a battle," Boone panted, reloading his sidearm as he watched the necropolis float with impunity above them, a dark, pulsing heart in the sky. "It's an exercise in attrition. We're running on ammo and magic. He's running on us." Line staggered, a trickle of blood running from her nose from the sheer exertion. "He's right, General Rhodes," she said over the comms, her voice strained. "We are fighting the symptom, not the disease. The necropolis, the soul cage meta. As long as that ship is in the air, this battle never ends. It is the only target that matters." Boone stared up at the flagship, its shroud of unbeing visibly shrugging off stray rifle fire. "Then we need to take that bastard down." High above the battle, the bridge of the necropolis was not a command center, but a workshop of horrors. Mortis Rex ignored the tactical display, the sound of the battle a distant, unimportant hum. He was finishing his work. The wet, ragged breeding of brew in the mountain was gone, replaced by the rhythmic, metallic hiss-clank of articulated machinery. The Lich had finished the upgrades. Her missing left arm was gone, replaced by a massive steam piston-driven siege claw of blackened iron and brass piping. Her right leg was now a heavy, three-toed mechanical strut, fused directly to her shattered hip with sizzling, green-black necrotic energy. Her fur was stitched back with arcane wire, and her one remaining eye glowed with the same cold, blue light as his own. Mortis Rex stepped back, his skull-like face and mask of cold, artistic pride. He had not just saved his general, he had perfected her. She was no longer a simple brute. She was a walking siege engine, a perfect fusion of arcane science and necrotic will, rebuilt to be stronger, faster, and utterly impervious to the crude chemical weapons that had felled her. He placed a skeletal hand on her new iron shoulder. "Let them tire themselves out," he whispered, as the word shield below flickered under a fresh volley. "Let them waste their energy on the dead." He turned his gaze to the Calgary Tower, his true objective. The real general is almost ready. Chapter 20, The Raptor and the Chinook. Time, Day 20 post-lock location. The river line, the Necropolis deck invasion clock. T plus 18 hours early. On the Center Street Bridge, the battle was turning from a defense into a eulogy. 2 hours ago, the word shield had blossomed violet over the span, bright as a promise. Now it was failing, the canopy guttering like a dying flame. The Volpari Magisters were pale with exhaustion, and the Accord soldiers were down to their last magazines. "Shields are at 9%, Major." Line's voice was a strained rasp over the comms. "They've breached the east flank." "The dead are crossing at the Simmons building." Boone Hennessy watched as a reanimated Balagard pulled itself onto the riverbank, shrugging off a burst of rifle fire. "We're done, Rhodes," he muttered. "It's over." Then, a new sound cut through the air. It wasn't the guttural roar of steam paddles or the whine of the F-18s. It was a deep, percussive thrack, 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 thrack that rattled the windows of the skyscrapers, the sound of heavy modern rotors. Simultaneously, an unfamiliar voice, calm and digitized, split the command frequency. Accord command, this is Viper 1. Flight of 4 F-22s, Angels 20. Weapons hot, commencing interdiction on hostile airships, Fox 3. High above, 4 sleek, diamond-shaped fighters, almost invisible against the dark sky, unleashed a volley of long-range AIM-rams. The missile streaked past the necropolis and slammed into the flanking steam galleons, the ships that were pressing the assault on the riverbank. Immediately, the effect was devastating. The galleons, unshielded and unprepared for a high-altitude, high-tech threat, were blown apart in silent, blossoming fireballs. The necropolis and its core escorts immediately tightened their formation, their shrouds flaring, but the pressure on the ground was instantly relieved. Viper 1, good hits, re-engaging with sidewinders on the smaller craft. As the air war erupted, 4 massive CH-47 Chinooks, flying low and fast over the city's southern edge, landed in a cloud of debris in the middle of Stampede Park, 2 kilometers behind the riverline. Their ramps dropped, and soldiers poured out, not provincial guard, but heavily armed U.S. Army Rangers. They didn't dig in. They immediately began unloading crates of ammunition, medical supplies, and anti-tank rockets, rushing them forward to the bridge. Small 8-man squad of Rangers, clad in high-tech black-on-black gear, sprinted toward the bridge, led by a captain whose face was a mask of calm intensity. He found Boone and lying near the Abrams tank. "Major Hennessy?" the captain yelled over the rotor wash. "Captain Cole, 75th Rangers. The paper pushers in D.C. finally cut the red tape. Where are your reinforcements?" Boone stared at the fresh ammo crates being run up the bridge. "You're late, Cole. But you're goddamn beautiful. You just gave us another hour." "We don't have an hour," Lion interjected, her yellow eyes fixed on the necropolis, which was now contemptuously ignoring the F-22s and resuming its slow crawl toward the cavalry tower. "Your fighters are a welcome distraction, Captain, but they cannot damage that flagship. The soul cage emitter is still active. We are still losing." "My pilots confirm," Cole said, his gaze following hers. "That shield is magic. They're throwing missiles at a ghost. What's the plan?" Sentinel Kestrel, his black feather slick with sweat and grime, landed silently beside them. "The plan was simple, Captain. The shroud stops kinetic and energy attacks. It does not stop me. My 2 sentinels and I were going to fly through it. A rapid strike assassination. A 3-man suicide run," Boone grunted. "It was the only play we had." Captain Cole looked at Kestrel, then at the massive Balagard mercenaries holding the line, then back at his Chinook, its rotors still spinning. A new, audacious plan clicked into place. "No," Cole said. "It's not a suicide run anymore. It's a boarding party." He keyed his helmet mic. "Big Iron, this is Spartan. Bring the bird to me, now." The lead Chinook lifted off and hovered, settling onto the bridge itself, its ramp facing the command group. "You're insane," Rhodes said, staring at the helicopter. "You'll be blown out of the sky before you get within a click." "Not if we have an escort," Cole said, looking at Kestrel. "You said you can fly through it. Can you fly with us? Run interference. Can you stop a word lance?" Kestrel's cobalt eyes gleamed. He understood. "We cannot create a shield for a machine that large. But we can deflect. We can intercept. We will be your guardian angels, Captain. We will clear the path." "Good." Cole turned to his squad. "Rangers, breaching gear. We're the tip of the spear." He then looked at Boone and Line. "I need your heaviest hitters. I need that Balagard sergeant, Boren. I need your Eisengrim shock troops. Our team will cut the hole. They'll be the hammer. We punch through the hole. We find the emitter. We plant our charges, and we get out." Line nodded. A sharp, predatory smile on her fox-like face. A combined assault. Yes, this will work. Boone Hennessy clapped Cole on the shoulder, a wild grin splitting his face. All right, Captain, you and your flyboys keep Mortis busy. We'll knock on his front door. He turned to Rhodes. General, give us a distraction. I want every rocket, every tank shell, every goddamn bullet we have focused on that flagship. Give 'em an apocalypse.